Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 6 of the Spongebob-Lematic podcast. Today, we are reviewing, as I said at the end of last time, episode 6. 6A is Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, where 6B is Pickles. Now, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, this episode was written by Paul Tibbett, Mark O'Hare, and Mr. Lawrence, and then was storyboarded by Paul Tibbett and Mark O'Hare. So, fits the kinds of ways that works that we've been seeing. Some familiar names there. This episode is the premiere episode of the characters Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, if you couldn't guess. Unlike other episodes, Sandy's introduction wasn't called Sandy and the first episode wasn't called SpongeBob. But there is some context to that here, and we can just go ahead and get right into that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this one starts off with a really funny like parody of like a 1950s, 1960s like Aquaman cartoon. It stars a very, Aquaman in or Mermaid Man in this rather. It seems like to be a very strapping lad going around doing underwater things. He can communicate with fish. As can his, as kind of different to Aquaman. You have where he's just by himself. Mermaid Man has a sidekick called Barnacle Boy, who looks to be a little more of like a meek kid, but he's kind of more of a kid, while Mermaid Man is a man.
it's really more like, I mean, if you're going to call someone a lad, Barnacle Boy is the lad. Mermaid Man's a little old for that, even at that time. Like, it's more of a, if you think of it in like Batman and Robin terms, like they are undersea, so there's a lot of Aquaman inspiration, but I think that's where the duo kind of dynamic came from on that, that
Yeah,
classic Batman Robin, Adam West style thing.
absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely kind of a combination of Batman and Robin and Aquaman, because obviously it's underwater, so they're not going to do Batman underwater.
Yeah, I mean, there's, some of the physics don't really work there, but SpongeBob doesn't really care about that. But, they just combine the themes together, see what they can do with it. And so the way that it's introduced is SpongeBob and Patrick watching it as a show, but it seems like within the universe of SpongeBob, this show isn't like produced. This is just adventures that actually happened to them in their youth. But because it's inspired by those like early kind of like, 60s era superhero shows, Merry Man and Barnacle Boy, they're now a lot older. But before we get into that, we do see, SpongeBob and Patrick showing a bit more of their kind of childish side, that we see every so often in this season. They dress up, as Merry Man and Barnacle Boy themselves. They just decide they're gonna start annoying Squidward. They just throw some things around and pretend he's a supervillain,
Yeah,
and he
they
says,
call him Reflecto. He because he's outside tanning with like a one of those, which I don't think I've ever seen one of those in real life, but Squidward uses it a lot. Those like the three
it's a
panel,
reflector.
yeah, it's a reflector thing. I don't think I've ever actually seen anybody use them, but Squidward is using it, so it's here.
I've never seen no one use it, but I have seen it.
Mm.
I feel like it's one of those things where, like, I honestly don't know how many people I've really seen tanning, because I think of these days it's one of those things where it's like the dangers of it are really people are really aware of. So
I've seen
especially
people
like
tanning before. I've seen people tanning like in their driveways in the middle of summer
right,
here in the
like what I'm
south,
saying is
but
adding in these additional things that are going to
yes,
direct more sunlight. I think people are a little more, maybe just a little more cautious about it.
yeah,
That's
for
my
sure,
take anyway,
for
because I
sure.
know that's one of those things you might classically like see in something like this, but you don't really see it in real life these days, at least.
hmm and then yeah, as they're doing this, SpongeBob and Patrick are running around, and one of the things that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy do is they have these rings that they touch together, where they say Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy unite. And to replicate this in their little, in SpongeBob and Patrick's little like cosplay, they have donuts, which they introduce by SpongeBob saying, "You know what this means," and then Patrick going, "Donuts." And then when they touch rings, you can see that Patrick's already has a bite taken out of it, or touch donuts, you can see that he has a bite taken out of it. Which is fun little thing. But yeah, I mean, you brought this up. They are just actually fucking with Squidward in this scene, like because in a lot of episodes, it's like okay, Squidward kind of intervenes with their fun or whatever. Like they just mess with him in this. Like they are just fucking with him.
It was definitely something I noticed, and when we've gotten through the actual plot summary, there are some points I kind of want to go back around with compared to other episodes here. But yeah, I do think it is something worth noting that in this episode they just actively begin to bother Squidward, who hasn't done anything really to deserve that yet. And then like when Squidward is just trying to have his day still, they say something along the lines of, "Oh, what would the real Mermaid Man do?" And then Squidward's like, "Why don't you go ask him?" And they ask him, "Elaborate, you vile fiend." And he says he lives in the retirement home down the way. So they do go to visit them in the retirement home. And then we see there's a fish here he is not named. He might have an incidental number. I'm sure they usually do.
Yeah.
But he's reading a paper. He's at the retirement home. He's the person at the front desk. It's funny because like it's like they could have put anything on this newspaper, but what they put on there was school dropout rate soars.
Yeah, that's very strange. And another thing too is SpongeBob and Patrick are convinced that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, at least at the beginning, aren't just there because they're old and retired. They think that they're there working undercover, which is funny. Like they can't accept like they must be there working undercover. And then we finally see them, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and as opposed to how we saw them on the TV at the beginning of the episode, we see them. They're very old, very decrepit. But it is weird. They are just humans. Like we don't see very many humans in this show. They are humans and they do actually have superpowers. Like that's something that like kind of they're not just like, they weren't just TV characters or whatever like they were, but like they were people with superpowers, which is very, I don't know, it's something there's nothing else like them in the whole SpongeBob canon as far as I know.
It is one of those things that is strange because they are humans, but this kind of matters. So I'll preface it. They're like animated. They're still just characters in the show, but they're also just people.
Yes.
I I don't know in what all specific offshoot, like quote unquote non-canon, like comic books, whatnot, that go into this. The reason that they have powers and can survive underwater is because of a nuclear accident. The kind of thing that like
Yeah.
it's one of those things like superhero tropes. You something radioactive, something nuclear. Now you have powers, and that's why they're able to survive underwater that way. So the first thing though, when SpongeBob and Patrick see them and they're getting all excited, obviously they're just two old people trying to live their lives. And so the first thing Mermaid Man says, like, "Oh, are they here to fix the TV?" Which this actually, speaking of supplemental media, kind of comes back later in that on PlayStation 1, they did release a SpongeBob game. It has a Game Boy Advance port that came out later as well. But in that game, it's Patrick's birthday, and your goal is to get Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's signatures. And in addition to a bunch of other tasks, fixing their TV is something you have to do.
Oh, that's a fun little Easter egg to throw in there.
And so after that, basically, obviously they're not there to fix the TV. They're convinced that, these two are undercover. Basically, SpongeBob says that, I know you guys are undercover because there's evil afoot. And then Mermaid Man has like PTSD, like war flashbacks. Whenever
Yeah.
he hears the word evil, he starts like completely losing it. And SpongeBob just does not.
Evil.
SpongeBob keeps saying it. He just has no comprehension of the mental damage he's clearly doing to this elderly person.
There's a moment where Mermaid Man clings to a as I would say bubbler, because I am from the Midwest.
A
Uh,
water fountain.
no, a
I am
bubbler.
also from the Midwest, and we don't call it
All
that
right, well, I'm
here.
from the
But
part of the Midwest that is correct. Um,
what?
he sprays himself in the face and yells, "Death Ray!" He's clearly having like an actual like. I mean, it's funny as like a cartoon bit, but when you're actually thinking about what the implications of this are, this old man is actually having like a PTSD like flashback and like a PTSD like break, which is very sad. If anybody has ever seen anybody have those, they're very scary and very sad and not at all funny. But because it's a kids show, they can kind of just get away with having it in there.
It does end up with the receptionist kicking them out over it, though. So I mean, to that extent, it is taken seriously.
Yeah,
And then SpongeBob and Patrick, they're kind of dejected about it, and they have this exchange. Patrick's basically like, "Oh, it's too bad they're old." And then SpongeBob says, "Old people are the greatest." And we see this thing. This is another one of those things where SpongeBob just does something,
yeah.
like for whatever reason, like an actual real life. elderly man does give, like, a thumbs up, like,
He's
it is
like
not, like, animated. It is a video of a person just doing a thumbs
it's
up.
some
That
like
person
60-year-old
actually
60-year-old dude wearing like a Tommy Bahama shirt and a sailor's cap doing like a wink and a thumbs up. It is very
well,
odd.
the person it is, his name is Don Newhouse. He was actually the parking lot security guard for Nickelodeon at that
Oh,
time.
that's pretty cool.
However, as you can probably imagine, considering this episode is from the '90s and it's now 2022, he has passed away. He was already elderly
Yeah.
then. That happened in 2015, but he appears like not frequently, but he does have at least one other appearance in the show that I know off the top of my head. So he's just a guy. He seemed to be having fun, be a part of it, and got in the episode, and they had him do a thumbs up when SpongeBob talks about old people.
I mean, it's a funny, like, I don't know why it's funny, but it is funny. So like
It's
I
because it doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it just doesn't make it. It's just like, but it's different than just like random humor. But it kind of, I don't know. It's very strange, but I like it. And then yeah, after this, SpongeBob vows to get Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy out of retirement. But then they cut to them in a in like a food line, like because they're at a nursing home, so they're going on the food line, and you see Mermaid Man is kind of just all the time in like superhero mode, weirdly. Like he's in this kind of mindset where he's both a superhero but also a old man at a retirement home. So he goes like, to the meatloaf, to the broccoli, and then like to the table, away, and like runs to it and whatever. And it's very strange mindset that he's in. But it's one that, again, if you've been around old people that have like memory loss issues and potentially some PTSD stuff, it's something like is kind of accurate.
It's something like you don't even really think about as a kid watching it is why he would be like that. But when you consider it's like, old people often, when they get to that age, if they have some of those mental problems, he clearly is meant to be representing. They're going to kind of rely on what they have and what they've always done. And since he's always done things in that fashion, of course, he's going to make everything a bit more superhero-esque for that, which I don't think that's something media has really explored a lot, is the idea of like a real superhero who gets to that age and like just is existing.
Yeah, yeah, like
So in a sense, it's kind of an inspired idea.
yeah, I mean, the closest we've ever gotten to it is spoilers for Avengers Endgame. Those of you who haven't seen it, there's old Steve Rogers in it at the end. Um, and but he doesn't really like. He just kind of like talks old, but there's nothing. The idea of like having somebody who's an old, and comics have explored this a little bit, but as
Well,
far as like,
comics have explored everything by
yes,
now.
exactly. But like more traditional media, TV and movies, there's really not been this idea of like an old man trying to be a superhero still, or somebody who was a younger man being a superhero now being old. It's an interesting concept.
It is the idea that like someone who seems all powerful also, no one can turn back time kind of idea.
Yep.
But what happens from there? So SpongeBob, he goes back. He goes back in without Patrick this time, and is telling them these dramatic tales. He's like, do you remember this? Do you remember that? And like all these glory days, right? And he's trying to do it to inspire them out of retirement. But essentially, he's basically just bringing things up. They don't want to hear. He's bothering them, and there's this whole thing where Mermaid Man basically wants him to leave because at this point, Mermaid Man doesn't know who this person is.
Yeah.
His thought he was a TV repairman. He's clearly not.
Yeah, yeah, that's when
And
that bit come back. He's, oh look, it's the TV repair man.
and it's this whole thing where like the receptionist fish, he comes back in and sees SpongeBob again and kicks him out, and then Mermaid Man, like kind of not being all there, is like, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife, and then he gets kicked out. And Patrick's question is, did you reunite our heroes? Well, no, but I'm married.
It's the comedic timing of that whole sequence is great. It's like Mermaid Man is like, I don't want to fight evil. I want to eat my meatloaf. He's like, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. And then the receptionist kicks in, you may kiss the bride. And then he gets kicked. It's so nothing, but it's so comedically well timed. It's such a good bit. Oh my gosh.
It's like a tangent where it's like you can almost see what his through line of logic was, where he's kind of starting to talk about like the power that he has and like
Yeah.
the things he's done for the state. But then like it gets crisscrossed up in his mind and he doesn't remember what he's saying or where he is, and it ends like in this only tangentially related thing that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's so great. And then later we see Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy on rocking chairs, and Mermaid Man again he's going like up, up and away, and rocking really fast in the chairs. And then SpongeBob comes dressed up as a woman with a purse,
Southern Belle.
Southern Belle, if you will, yes. And then Patrick comes up and does this very awkward robbery of him. Again, this is to try to inspire Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy to come save him slash her, save them from the situation. But instead Barnacle Boy just comes up and is just like, can you keep it down? Mermaid Man's trying to sleep. And then we go to, it cuts over to Mermaid Man, and he's just there like giving like this weird grin with his eyes open. And then SpongeBob does this like, ever alert, Mermaid Man has trained himself to sleep with his eyes open.
And that's the thing is, SpongeBob and Patrick this whole time just are not leaving them alone. They're causing all these problems. So I believe it's Barnacle Boy says to Mermaid Man, like, we need to come out of retirement. There is evil afoot, and he's right there. And so they get out their rings, and kind of in reference to what happened earlier, Mermaid Man's response to seeing the rings is donuts.
Yeah. Yeah, and he puts them on. They try to throw a water ball at SpongeBob, but of course, because he's a sponge and they also live underwater, it's not very effective.
Yeah, to quote, he's absorbing the water ball like some kind of evil sponge.
Which I suppose he is. And then they do they do the they go dog paddle away, and they do this very awkward doggy paddle swim and make like a vortex around SpongeBob and Patrick and launch them away with the thing.
And they also have the power of, Aquaman can unite sea creatures. They do that, but they can only unite the sea creatures from the old folks' home. Um, so they just have a bunch of old people come kick SpongeBob and Patrick out, but then they got what they wanted in that they come out of retirement. You see SpongeBob and Patrick back home watching TV, and Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are on air, but it's just them playing chess because they're elderly still.
Yeah, it's there's there's a bit where like they every time they make a move, there's like that comic book or like that like old superhero cartoon like bam pow. But then what like Mermaid Man gets up and goes like to answer the phone, and he can't hear, he's on the other line, and then he sits back down, and there's one that's like sit, and then it cuts to SpongeBob and Patrick watching it again, and Patrick's like, you could would have happened without you, SpongeBob, and then he winks and it goes wink, and that's the end of the episode. It's just
Those kinds of like Batman interjections as a
yeah.
word bubble sort of
Hmm.
ideas.
Yes.
Now, to look at this episode as a whole, you know, I I've been one of those people, and it's a very common thought where it's like, modern SpongeBob changed. And I look at this episode, and to me, what I'm feeling is the aspects that people say are changes were actually always there. If we look at this episode, because I do have a fair amount of critiques with it. I honestly don't think it's one of the better season one episodes. With the other episodes, we've been able to say it does something visually interesting and unique. It's clever. It establishes how optimism and intent and karma work in this world. But this episode just doesn't really seem to care about any of that in the same way. Like, again, I brought this up very specifically at the beginning. Squidward isn't doing anything wrong,
Yeah.
but he's being bothered, and this kind of directly goes against the ideas that have been set up about the universe so far. The actual plot of the episode, I feel like it isn't necessarily like it doesn't it's a clever concept of like retired superheroes like that is something interesting to explore, but the way it's explored, it's just SpongeBob wants something, he says he wants something, he says he wants something, he says he wants something, and then the show tells you he gets it, but like he really didn't get much of anything because coming out of retirement just meant that they broadcast through everyday life, but it's like nothing actually changed other than a camera was there. um and we see, these kinds of things where SpongeBob, he acts very childish. His key character trait is being obnoxious towards someone. Um, Both him and Patrick are a level of just stupid and not understanding that like no reasonable person would be given the context, like even within universe. It's all these things where people say, like I started this, people say modern SpongeBob changed. And I'm seeing this is episode 6, and I'm thinking, no, it didn't. But I'm thinking what people don't realize is that, after the first movie, which is when season 3 ended, until 2017, Paul Tibbett, the writer for this episode, became the showrunner and the producer. And so obviously the way that he writes and sees, and this isn't the only way that he writes these characters. He was parts of a few other episodes we talked about too, but this is clearly kind of his interpretation of what the characters in the universe are. And again, you can see it this early on. It was something that if you were following who did what and you weren't like just like an actual literal child watching it like most of us were, you could see this is probably the direction the show is going to go when you find out that after the movie Steven Hillenburg's not the showrunner anymore.
Yeah, and I do very much agree. As much as I do think this episode has a lot of funny jokes, and I think the concept is interesting, when you actually look at what is happening, like a lot of episodes that we talk about, especially in reference to Squidward, how he is kind of the arbiter of his own downfall in a lot of ways. He's the one usually being an asshole. SpongeBob's just kind of trying to do his own thing, trying to exist and just have fun. He is like, it's not like he never does anything to Squidward, but it's normally Squidward kind of asks for it or in some way is inciting a lot of this. SpongeBob is just the bad guy in this episode. He is just like kind of being a bad person, but he's doing it in the SpongeBob way where he's, not really understanding it. And in most other contexts that can be kind of fine, but when he's being the active problem, that's not a good thing. Like he's just bothering these old people that are trying to live their lives and force them like to do things that they just don't want to do, and completely ignoring, one of them having like a mental, like having a very severe like mental deficiency. And it's very strange.
And one other thing too, that we did not mention, but I do want to bring up as part of this specific conversation. People will often talk about, in more modern SpongeBob, and by modern, we're starting like at this point, we're almost starting in like 2010. Like, obviously, it's everything post season three is what you're going to hear, but that's where a lot of people kind of last saw it, would have been in that kind of 2010s era. There was this big propensity for like these kinds of like zoom in, gross out visuals where it's like you zoom in and all of a sudden everything is like hyper detailed in a way that's just unappealing. And this episode does that. The episode 6 of the show, 6A, is the very first time that happens where we zoom in, like we don't it's not like a zoom, but it's just a highly detailed semi grotesque zoom in of Barnacle Boy's face, and how elderly it is and all these imperfections in it. And I just at this point I've been convinced that if you think that new SpongeBob's changes came out of nowhere, then I don't think you necessarily actually remember what the show was like. I think you remember the episodes that you liked and the parts of the episodes you liked.
I mean, and again, and I think it's still kind of a fair thing because it's like there are certain things where like this is still, I think, a good episode in a way. It's just there's aspects of it that I don't think are as good, and those aspects, unfortunately, kind of were some of the things that were brought to the forefront of later episodes. So it's not that necessarily SpongeBob. I do think you're right. SpongeBob didn't necessarily change. It's just a lot of the more negative aspects of it got got more pronounced over time, which tends to happen with shows. There are things that like might be kind of funny, but the showrunners don't necessarily understand why they're funny, so they'll kind of beat them into the ground. I think a very, this isn't related to this episode at all, but me and you have talked about this before, with some of the random bits that they do, and then especially like modern day SpongeBob will just repeat them but not understand why they're funny. So the Nosferatu bit of that we're not going to see that episode for a while. They just show Nosferatu in one of the later episodes and not understanding why that bit is funny. And I think that's kind of the same thing here. I think the zooming in on the on Barnacle Boy's like face here, I think that's kind of funny. Like it's just showing like a hyper like, and there's been a couple like very smaller instances of that before this, but not anywhere to this extent. And then they just like, oh, that was kind of funny. Let's do that, for the next 20 years. And that's where it becomes a problem.
And it's more so just like I'm pointing to like this episode as it's not like this episode is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's still perfectly watchable. It's not my favorite, but I can say it's not like all that bad. It has all of the groundwork. Like if you think about like what are the things you hear levied against modern SpongeBob, my point is that every single one of those arguments, you can see its foundations in this episode, and it's a perfect little microcosm of that. And I think it's surprising to me that I've never seen it come up in the discussion before for that like sake, because it really is. Again, they're not even like they do not break the episode. They're not these super egregious things here, but you can see in a beginning form all of the problems that people have with what SpongeBob would become, and it's all here in one 11-minute episode.
I completely agree. Well, I believe
And
then that takes us to episode 6A, which is Pickles.
I
Uh,
think you mean 6B because we were
oh,
just talking about 6A.
shit. Fuck. All right, Kurt, you take it.
Fucked it up, damn it. So this episode is Pickles. Just by the name, it's a very memorable episode. You can kind of get a guess about what it's going to be about if you haven't seen it. This one is written by Steve Fonte, Chris Mitchell, and Peter Burns, and then was storyboarded by Steve Fonte and Chris Mitchell, and also Jay Lender. And so this episode is a Krusty Krab set drink episode. Makes sense with the name, the title of it. We kind of go into the Krusty Krab. We see, Squidward, unenthused as usual, kind of normal thing here. Someone is trying to order. They're not quite sure what they're going to get. They end up getting a Krabby Patty. Squidward's basically just being like mean to them for no reason.
He's being
Where,
very sarcastic. He's
yeah,
yeah.
they're just like, "Oh, I'll get the patty." How original! And there's this whole little bit where the order gets put in, SpongeBob makes it, and he makes it perfectly. He lists out everything he's doing, does it really fast, has all this like internal jargon he does. But for this specific customer, what I wanted to bring up is just perfect like Squidward moment. The customer is like, "Can I get some extra salt? We're all out. Could you check?" No. And it's like it's that kind of moment we all wish that we could do when we're in situations like that and like that kind of low level, like kind of retail or like food environment where you just want to be like, no, because I already know and I don't have to check.
First,
But Squidward just
while
actually says it.
I do agree with that, I do think there is like, because again, because of the character that Squidward is, I think it's more so like he's just being a bad employee and not like I think he might not even have any idea whether or not they're out of salt. He just doesn't want to get it, so he's just saying no. Which yeah, either way you want to look at it, I think is perfectly fine. It's
Either way, you've wanted to say no.
yes, absolutely. And then after that customer, a very very large fish enters the establishment and just like Godzilla stomps his way up to the register. And Squidward again being sarcastic this whole time is goes, "Let me guess, Tiny, a small salad." But then this character proceeds to order, "I'll take a double triple bossy deluxe on a raft, 4x4 animal style, extra shingles with a shimmy and a squeeze, light axle grease, make it cry, burn it and let it swim." And then Squidward of course responds with, "We serve food here, sir." And that order is nuts, right? Because obviously, we think he's just kind of, as a kid, I just thought like he's just saying words. You know what I mean? Like he's just kind of saying random stuff that sounds not even food related, but also slightly food related. But
They're food words, but no normal person would talk like that.
oh, absolutely. They're typically, and you kind of hear SpongeBob in the beginning of this episode, like when he's announcing the order. So like the first guy who orders a Krabby Patty with extra onions, and so he goes like, "One crying Johnny," which like you can kind of piece together, like crying onions make you cry, so it's like a crying patty. Like, all right, somebody orders 12 Krabby Patties on wheat buns, and he says like 12 something cows on a farm or whatever. But yeah, so what I looked up because I was curious, because one, I wanted to look up like what the whole order was, and then below it listed what that actually means in food terms. So double triple bossy means 6 all beef patties. However, adding 4x4 animal style adds an additional 4 beef patties plus 4 slices of cheese, so it's 10 patties in total. Then like you kind of like you like grill it in mustard. You sear it. You add light axle grease means adding butter, but light means not too much butter because that's light. And then patties under American cheese. Deluxe is if you order a deluxe burger, that one's pretty simple. Iceberg lettuce, tomatoes, cheese. But you can kind of ignore the cheese for this order because there's already it on the 4x4. And there's just so much more stuff. Like animal style is just you essentially coat everything in special sauce. The place where I looked at, somebody actually made what this burger quote unquote would be. It's essentially a 2-foot tall stack of just an amalgam of bread and patty and lettuce and stuff. it is one of the most disgusting looking things ever. So however they came up with this being the order that Bubble Bass uses is quite ridiculous.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not even sure if they knew what all the words they were saying meant, but they just put words together that they knew meant something. I think that could be very well be the case, but I've seen that before as well, and it is pretty ridiculous in reality what that would mean. And then the what SpongeBob makes him after Squidward like is like, oh, we serve food here. It's just a normal Krabby Patty,
Yeah, it's just
and
it
that
maybe
doesn't
is
seem to be the
slight.
problem with the order.
Yeah, no, it's maybe slightly bigger like than what he's been serving, but it just looks like a normal Krabby Patty. And then, but then when SpongeBob comes out with it, he seems to recognize who this is, and he goes, "Bubble Bass." And there's this like little old Western showdown motif that kind of happens between them, where Bubble Bass says, "I heard you're pretty good," and then SpongeBob's like, "I heard you're a little picky." And like it's a cool like little like um what's the word I'm looking for? Like set piece that they have
Moment.
going on there. Yeah, moment, like little vignette, I believe is the word I was looking for that they had. Um, and then and everyone in the restaurant is gathered around for this. Apparently, Bubble Bass is like infamous for doing this. SpongeBob clearly knows that. And he takes a bite of the burger and he reveals that he forgot the pickles, which, as we all know, is the biggest cardinal sin in burger flipping.
And we learned something really ridiculous here. We zoom in on the menu board, and by zoom in, I mean we do like 120 times zoom.
Yeah.
The Krusty Krab has a refund policy, apparently, and so Mr. Krabs now has to refund the $2, which this man spent $2 on. He should have gotten like a gigantic tower of meat, but I mean, I guess $2 is fine for you. Hell,
Yeah.
today, honestly, shit, like you're gonna get that for like if you get like fries and a drink, that's like $8.
Yeah,
So
dude,
honestly,
legit.
that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
That's pretty good. There is a funny moment though before he confronts Mr. Krabs, where like so Mr. Krabs and Squidward are like standing next to each other. When Bubble Bass walks up to Mr. Krabs, he just throws Squidward across the restaurant. It doesn't amount to anything, and there's no like follow up. He just throws him across the restaurant.
And
For,
again, but like it flows because he was sarcastic this whole time. So the fact
yeah,
Squidward has now experienced harm does not hit the audience in any way other than humorous.
exactly. It's like he deserves it, but he just gets fucking tossed. Um, and then Mr. Krabs begs Bubble Bass to consider not taking his $2 back. He says, "How about a free glass of water? A dozen free glasses of water. I'll even put ice in it." No.
Discounts on bathroom tokens, by the way, which
Discounts on
like
bathroom tokens is one of his other offers.
not even like you have to buy something to use the bathroom. Like you get tokens with which you can
Well,
use the
it's yeah.
bathroom.
Not only does Bubble Bass have to buy tokens, he doesn't even get free bathroom tokens as his compensation. He gets a discount on bathroom tokens, which is like you still have to buy them, but it'll be cheaper. It's
I've
just
never seen a bathroom token. I can imagine it works like a locker system, but it's like
yeah. I mean, I've heard
that's
of I have unfortunately run across like bathrooms that you have to pay to get into, but yeah, not any sort of like thing that you have to redeem it like a token or anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it
Um.
goes to show how that is. But afterwards, Mr. Krabs basically that $2 is coming out of your paycheck. But SpongeBob, like, not even about the money. He's just devastated because this job is his life. It's what he's always wanted, and he's now screwed it up. And we see again a character trait we've seen in SpongeBob time and time again up to this point now. Is now that his confidence has been shaken and he's nervous, he cannot even do the most basic of tasks. Like he starts trying to make a Krabby Patty, but he has no idea what he's doing. He's putting his hand in it. He's thinking a boot goes in it. He's putting a frying pan on it to the point where Mr. Krabs basically just tells him like, "Go home."
Yeah, and then he starts to leave the Krusty Krab, and he has a freak out because he's like, "Where's the door, Mr. Krabs? The front door is missing!" And we see it's like just 5 feet to his right. And then he
And
walks
then
out.
he's like, "Which way do I live?"
Yeah, Mr. Krabs has to tell him, and then it's just this whole like kind of it's not necessarily a montage. It's just this sequence of things of him not knowing how to do anything in his life. So he goes home and tries to go to bed, He doesn't know how to get into the bed. He starts like listing it out like he starts listing out like you would like a recipe for like, because when we see him earlier, he lists out every ingredient in a Krabby Patty. So like bun, patty, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, ketchup, mustard, like in that order or whatever. And so he starts doing that. It's like, is it mattress, SpongeBob, blanket, pillow? And then he's like, oh no, I remember. It's mattress, SpongeBob, mattress, then sheets, pillow. And then he gets like under one of the mattresses, but obviously the other one's laying on him. And then there's this like little thing of him trying different combinations to sleep. And then we see this. It goes all night until the next morning when he's under his bed with his eyes poking out, saying, "Ah, I almost had it."
And we see at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob's not there right now. Squidward is having to do the cooking. And we have this whole moment where there's some customers talking about how dissatisfied they are. And they're like, he burnt my Krabby Patty. He burnt my fries. He burnt my shake.
He burnt my shake. Which that line, I think me and you, I don't know if that's how much of a line that is like to the greater SpongeBob community, but me.
Someone did a Can't Touch This remix where instead of Can't Touch This, it's just he burnt my shake.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because I know me
Um,
and you all the time we'll just say to each other like, "He burnt my shake," just in that stupid voice.
it's
Uh,
just, dissatisfaction. He burnt my
he
shake.
burnt my shake, man. And so Mr. Krabs obviously being fed up at how his restaurant's being run, which kind of raises another question. I think I brought this up in the first episode of SpongeBob when we covered the first episode of SpongeBob. How the hell did the Krusty Krab even function as a restaurant before SpongeBob got there? Because as we see, when it's just Mr. Krabs and Squidward, the restaurant just cannot function at all. Squidward does not know how to cook. Mr. Krabs clearly is not interested in teaching him how to, like, in doing the cooking himself or teaching him. So, like, how did it exist at all before SpongeBob got there? Obviously, we see in this. I mean, this is
We have a
seasons.
like season like fucking 97 like deep lore episode
Yeah, but
about that.
like obviously, it's can be applied that there were employees there at some other point. But immediately before SpongeBob got there, how the hell did this place function?
Presumably not very well. Um, I mean, its only competition is significantly worse.
That, you
So,
know what, that is, and as we all know, the only two restaurants in Bikini Bottom are the Krusty Krab and the Chum Bucket.
which happen to be on the same street across from each other.
Yeah,
So
I think it is.
that
We do see other restaurants like in the show at some point, but
we
it's
see other restaurants, but I don't think they reside in Bikini Bottom.
possibly. But then yeah, so Mr. Krabs being fed up goes and tries to get SpongeBob. And when he arrives, there's like he has a toaster on his door, and when he goes into his house, everything's just a mess. There are things where that thing should never be, everything's upside down.
I think it's important to note too, like with setting the vibe, the music is playing backwards. It's the
Yes,
normal kind of like sad scene music they use, but they put it in reverse.
yes.
And then when SpongeBob shows up, he says, "Mr. Krabs, hello. Do you how do?
Dude,
I anything can't do right since because pickles."
yeah, he's just talking completely out of sorts. Um, and so Mr. Krabs vows to teach him how to. And he pulls out. I don't know why I always found this really satisfying as a kid. I don't know if you agree. So he pulls out this like little like sheet, and I feel like it's kind of an homage to like samurai movies. You'll sometimes see like characters in those films have like a roll, and like in that roll will be rolled up like weapons. So there'll be like sais, nunchuck, stuff like that. But he unrolls his, and it's all the ingredients to make a Krabby Patty. And I always found that really satisfying as a kid, seeing just like him roll out like all the ingredients to make a burger. Which it was something I wanted, but I would have no practical use for ever, and it would also probably be really gross. I just thought it was cool.
I mean, I think the idea is like I don't know specifically what you're referencing, but I would imagine like the idea, especially in something Eastern, is like it would be a concealment scroll. Like it looks like a piece of paper, but it's hiding things within it.
Kind of. I think it's
Um,
more of a something to like transport. It's I you kind of see it like if you have seen like samurai movies or ninja movies more specifically, like they kind of have their weapons laid out like that, like so like you can pick what weapon you want to use. And I've seen it like done on like a small mat like that where they've had them laid out. Is kind of what my thought process was.
it's possible. I'm not specifically sure about that, but I was thinking like, oh, if it's a scroll, that can be like also kind of like one of those metaphorical things where you're imparting knowledge with it. You have all the
Yeah,
things you
that
need
that
right there.
that
But
absolutely could have been it as well.
Either way, we see SpongeBob just not knowing what he's doing as well. Like he's hammering bread, and like when the mat does get laid out, he looks at it, and we get like day night transitions. Mr. Krabs is waiting for him for at least like 2 days, and
He's waiting for him for 2 days
SpongeBob.
before he even makes his first move, like to like try to do anything. It's like
And
it's
his first move is to say, "I can't do it,"
yeah.
and then like when he's going on a rant about how he can't do it, he just subconsciously, because he's not thinking about it and he's not psyching himself out, he does manage to do it because his body does remember, and if he can just clear his mind, that's really that's in again most episodes other than the kinds of ones like we discussed in Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. SpongeBob's biggest flaw is that his ability to do things is directly correlated to his confidence in his ability to do them.
Yes, absolutely. If SpongeBob thinks he can do something, even if it's something that is physically impossible, he will probably be able to do it. But if he's not 100% confident in himself, usually he will fail even the most basic tasks miserably. But yeah, so SpongeBob confidently goes back to the Krusty Krab. He gets Squidward out of the kitchen.
He kicks Squidward out and then shoots him with like the fucking fire extinguisher foam.
I mean, he is like singed when he does it, so I suppose
He's
he
been
might have
burning
needed.
people's shakes all day,
He has been
so.
burning people shakes all day. And then yeah, he picks up his spatula, looks at his reflection, has a good smile. He's very confident. And then one of the passersby notices, "Hey, SpongeBob's back," and they all come in. And then Bubble Bass barges in and says, "So I hear SquarePants is back." That was a shit Bubble Bass voice, but we're moving swiftly onward. Um, and they face each other again, and even this time it's even like more like of a just direct western like showdown type thing, which I actually really like with the like the samurai movie like homage that we kind of had a little bit earlier. I think because a lot of people say western movies themselves a lot of times were influenced by old samurai movies. So it's a really cool bit of like dichotomy they have going on there of all these like old like filmmaking methods being used in this one random episode of SpongeBob. I think it's very interesting. Um, but then yeah, they he Bubble Bass asks for his usual, and SpongeBob brings it out, and Bubble Bass takes a bite out of it and says, "Wrong again. No pickles," and starts starts laughing down SpongeBob, starts making fun of him again. And SpongeBob notices that his tongue is like slightly raised off of his teeth, which I don't know how he led him to this conclusion, but he pulls up his tongue, and we see that there are 4 pickles on the bottom of it. And as we
And a pair of car
well, we
keys.
don't see those, but I then yeah. So SpongeBob explains he's been hiding the pickles under his tongue the whole time, and then Mr. Krabs said, "And those are the pickles from last time too." And then a random woman yells, "And there's my car keys!" And then Bubble Bass yells, "And there's my ride!" And then he just runs out of the restaurant.
And so, we see that the whole time, again, it wasn't even that SpongeBob made a mistake. It was that someone gave him a confidence issue. Because, like we said, because he was confident he could do it, he did it as
Exactly.
perfectly as it could possibly be done. And so we get a little, ending bit there where they're like, "Oh, 3 cheers for SpongeBob," and everyone's cheering, but Squidward's like, "Hooray,
Hooray!
woohoo!"
Woohoo! Whoopee!
But then SpongeBob, being the good sport, the positive attitude he is, says, "And let's not forget the guy who filled in for me when I was gone. 3 cheers for Squidward." And then instead of cheering, they'll just start booing him
Boo. And
violently.
then the last boo is so it's like hip hip boo, hip hip boo, hip hip boo, hip hip, and then it's just one guy yelling, "Boo, you stink!" And that's the end of the episode, which is this is a fantastic episode in my mind. I knew I liked this one. There's the bits that everyone always remembers, the crazy order, the him like the bit of him trying to get into bed and
He burnt
stuff.
my shake.
He burnt my shake, the thing, but I mean, every scene is funny bits after funny bit. I really am fond of this one. There's a funny implication that I thought of while watching this that again just didn't cross my mind as a kid, but like when he reveals that there were the pickles under his tongue, and Mr. Krabs is like, "Those are the pickles from last time too." That means that like, I mean, it's been like, again, because of the passages of time it's been like a week since that happened. So like he's just had pickles under his tongue for the last 2 weeks and didn't just like spit them out or eat them, which is with very strange if you ask me.
God only knows how long the car keys have been there.
Oh yeah, I mean we have no idea.
Like, I mean, at that point, it's like I feel like the thing is that might have honestly been an intentional thing where it's like your mind is distracted from the fact that pickles have been there for like a week by the fact that there's also a pair of car keys and you're told that right after.
Yeah,
So that's the thing that kind of sticks out as being not correct. It's like a gas smoke screen is what I'm
it's
looking
smoke screen.
for.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I would say so. Pickles, it's interesting this A and B kind of dichotomy here, where I feel like Pickles, it may not show everything that I think makes classic SpongeBob good and memorable and but I do think it's a good representation of like how people remember what SpongeBob was and what they liked about it at that time. And so for it to be paired with something like Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, where, like I said, I just continued to see things where I was like, this is going to become a bigger issue as time goes on. It's almost unfortunate to think about where, we were at a crossroads at this time where it's like these two things coexisted and for a long time still coming after this, that kind of like pickles kind of vibe that 6B had that will still be SpongeBob for the coming future. But I just feel like it's a bit unfortunate that those kinds of vibes, that kind of characterization, gets a little bit lost in the sauce over time. But we have it; it's still something that's there to be watched, and that in and of itself is something to be remembered and appreciated, and is definitely something you can always sit down and just watch the episodes that you liked and the things that you liked. You can just, if there's things you're not really vibing with, you don't have to watch every single thing for every show you are interested in.
exactly. And and to go kind of over the episode as a whole, I think this one, and there are other episodes that are like this for sure, but this one and Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are not like traditional SpongeBob stories. You know what I mean? SpongeBob stories are usually like it's with the main characters doing their own things. These episodes very much have a totally different kind of vibe to them. I feel like, especially Pickles, where it's this whole other separate vibe. It's kind of a character study on SpongeBob rather than it is watching all these characters interact. Which and we'll get these every once in a while for sure. But I think this is one of the better ones in that kind of vibe.
I think a lot of the early Krusty Krab based stories end up being like I don't want to say they're a study of Bikini Bottom like as a town and a culture with its peoples, but like in a way they show us a lot of that and not just like it's not just like this is SpongeBob, this is what SpongeBob's doing. It's like this is the community SpongeBob lives in and interacts with. And in doing so gives a lot of opportunity where like the incidental characters shine like he burnt my shake, hey SpongeBob is back, like it's these background characters who are never going to be main cast. They get this moment where, for those 15 seconds of fame, they are the one in your view and in your eye. And Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, I would say, it's kind of like that, but it's a little different because while they're not main cast, they will become their own thing and have their own like sets of like episode. I don't want to say arcs because they're not connected, but episodes about them and things that they're doing. But yes, they are both very different from the focus of like SpongeBob does this today.
Yes, exactly. And I think because this is it's a very simple concept, but it's this kind of they do this kind of whole spin on it. They could have just done an episode about like what if SpongeBob had a really difficult customer, but they kind of made it into like this weird Western standoff kind of thing, which I very much enjoy.
Yeah, this idea of like confrontation and conflict shown through, a classical, I mean, not like a super classical, but this like respected lens of like the Western showdown of like, this is life against life. This is,
Yeah,
a
very
conflict that cannot be solved under any other means.
very high stakes seeming for something as low stakes as it actually is, which I do like the dichotomy there.
It's one of those things too where it's like, the reality of the low stakes is like he could just not come back, Bubble Bass, but he chooses to come back and create problems on purpose because that's the kind of person he is. And he's not, again, like a main character and he's not someone who's gonna have a lot of like character focus, but we see him pop up every now and then and just be the kind of person he's shown to be here. He's a very consistent little background character.
Yeah, he's much more infrequent than I believe Merman and Barnacle Boy is, but yeah, he does show up
Absolutely.
every now and again. But yeah, that is Pickles, and that is episode 6. Again, I think overall pretty solid. But again, as we talked about, there's kind of these next few episodes that we're going to be covering have a very classic, outstanding episode, and then one that maybe not as fondly remembered, but still I think solid in its own way. Um, and that is and that's I think that's still very good. I mean, no episode in especially season one I would ever say is holistically bad. And that's and that's a pretty big praise for something this old, but still I mean, it stands the test of time for a reason.
It does, and I think, that's a sign of good media is it's something that you can go back to and enjoy regardless of other factors. And like that's not necessary to be good media because sometimes the world changes in unexpected ways and that changes the way that you're going to consume that piece of media. But that general idea of it's not like something where it's like I liked it as a kid because there were bright colors and yelling. It's like no, I can look at it now and be like, I like it because it's clever and it's fun and it has interesting ideas that it's trying to do. And the season one is definitely a lot like that. Season two and three definitely have a lot of moments like that too. So as we keep going forward, we would love to see you again next week. And I believe that's all that I have to say for that. And so if that's all that Shane has to say for that, then we will see you next time.
See everybody. Yeah, make sure to follow us on the podcast platform of your choice, as well as if you have any comments or questions for us, you can leave those on our YouTube channel, which is just Spongebob-Lematic Cast on YouTube, or follow us on Twitter at SB-Lematic Cast. You can do that for updates on when we post a new episode. Again, or you can just tweet at us with any comment or question we'll have, and we might even address it during the episode here. So thank you everybody, and have a good one.